My ex-wife's laugh died the second she saw me shaking hands with her millionaire fiancé. The champagne glass trembled in Carmen's hand. Her perfectly lined lips parted slightly, and for the first time in years, she had no words. The one, same woman who once told me I'd never fit into her high society dreams was now watching me laugh with the man she left me for. And not just any man, Ernest Langford, real estate heir and face of half the skyscrapers in this city. She had divorced me like she was returning a defective product. No emotion, no hesitation, just a signature and a cruel little smile. "You're sweet, Jordan," she'd said back then, "but being sweet doesn't pay for penthouses or charity galas." She had been rehearsing that line, I could tell. I never responded. I just gave her the pen. Now, here she was, still elegant, still cold, but her confidence cracked like glass when she realized I wasn't a waiter or a caterer or someone begging for attention. I was standing beside Ernest's father discussing contracts. I was a partner, a stakeholder, and I wasn't looking at her. The silence between us was loud. I didn't have to say anything. That's what made it worse for her. I smiled politely at a passing guest, took a sip of my whiskey, and continued talking to the CFO about the upcoming software rollout. Carmen didn't move. She didn't blink. Not until Ernest slid his arm around her waist and asked, "Everything okay?" She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, just surprised." He looked between us. "Wait, you two know each other?" I turned to him and said casually, "We were married a long time ago." Carmen's nails dug into the side of her glass. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to, because in that moment, surrounded by gold chandeliers and curated smiles, Carmen realized something I didn't need to explain. She hadn't just lost me. She had walked out on the man I was becoming, and I had made damn sure she'd see it with her own eyes. Carmen wasn't always like this. I remember the first time I saw her, standing under a flickering campus lamp, flipping through a worn-out copy of Wuthering Heights. Her coat was too thin for the weather, her hair tied up in a loose knot, and she had that kind of face that made you forget how to breathe. People noticed her, but not in the way they notice someone loud. She was soft-spoken, razor-sharp, and terrifyingly ambitious. Back then, I was just another engineering major trying to survive my final semester and build something real out of nothing. She was studying economics and volunteering at every elite networking event she could sneak into. We didn't belong in the same sentence, but somehow we ended up sharing the same story. She said I was too nice for my own good. I thought she was too good at pretending she didn't need anyone. Maybe we were both right. Our relationship wasn't a whirlwind. It was a slow burn. She didn't fall in love with flowers or poems. She fell in love with structure, security, and the version of myself I was still becoming. And I gave her everything I could, not because she asked, but because I wanted to believe that love, given fully and without condition, could be enough. It wasn't. After graduation, I turned down a 6-figure offer to build my own company. We struggled. There were days the power bill came second to groceries, days when ramen felt like a treat. I didn't mind. I thought she didn't either. But the signs were there. The dinners she stopped showing up for. The friends she never introduced. Me too. The outfits that got more expensive while our budget stayed the same. She never cheated, at least not in the way people expect. She just left emotionally, quietly. The day she told me she filed for divorce, she sat across from me, with her nails freshly done and no hint of hesitation in her voice. I asked her why. She said, "Because I want more, and you'll never catch up to me." I think that's the last time I let her hurt me. She married Ernest 6 months later, or at least she got engaged. The headlines made it look like a fairy tale. Carmen, the graceful socialite, and Ernest, the charismatic heir. No one mentioned me. Why would they? I wasn't part of her story anymore. But she didn't know she'd left me at the exact moment I was about to change everything. It took one investor, one breakthrough licensing deal, and a 20-hour workday cycle for 6 months straight. I never celebrated the small wins. I never posted about the contracts or the speaking engagements or the fact that I bought out the startup that rejected me 3 years earlier. I stayed quiet, intentional, focused, until last week when Ernest's company sent over the term sheet and asked if I'd be interested in a partnership for his AI expansion project. I read the email 3 times, then I signed it without blinking. I wasn't chasing revenge. That kind of thing is too dramatic, too noisy. No, I wanted something better. I wanted clarity. I wanted her to see, not through arguments or closure or screaming matches, but in absolute silence, that I had never needed to chase her to begin with. The irony is, Carmen wasn't even on my mind until she walked into the room tonight, clinging to Ernest like a trophy in heels. When I first arrived at the party, I hadn't even asked if she'd be there. I didn't care. I was there to finalize the partnership, meet the board, and keep things professional. But I wasn't about to walk away when fate handed me the cleanest confrontation I'd never planned. Ernest didn't know our past. Why would he? Carmen made sure her social circle didn't overlap with the one I was building, but fate is indifferent to design. She followed me out to the garden after the announcement. Her voice was quieter now, like she was speaking through layers of glass. Did you come here for me? No. Then why are you really here? Business. You could have emailed. I turned to her and said, I could have, but then I wouldn't have had the pleasure of seeing you realize exactly who you left. She looked at me like she wanted to say something cruel, but all that came out was silence. I didn't hate her. I didn't want to hurt her. But I wasn't going to comfort her either, because somewhere between being the man she left and the man she just saw walk into her new life like he owned the room, I had finally become the version of myself she never waited for. It started with her voice behind me, soft but shaking. Jordan, wait. I didn't turn around immediately. Letting her wait those 2 seconds longer was deliberate. When I finally looked back, Carmen wasn't standing like the woman who left me. Her arms were crossed, eyes darting to make sure. No one else was listening, jaw clenched like she was fighting the urge to yell. She took a step closer. You're really doing business with Ernest? Yes, I said simply. Her expression twisted. Are you doing this to get back at me? I almost laughed. Carmen, if I wanted revenge, you'd know. This isn't about you. It never was. That was the first blow. Her shoulders dropped. She wasn't used to being irrelevant in someone else's story. I know you, she said quickly. You're not the kind of man who just moves on like nothing happened. No, I agreed. I'm the kind of man who learns, who stops wasting time where it's not appreciated. She flinched. I meant every word. I was wrong, she said under her breath. I didn't think you'd become this. I did. I didn't think you could, she added, quieter. This time, I nodded slowly. That's the part that hurt the most, Carmen. Not that you left, but that you looked at me, your husband, and didn't see any potential. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. And now? You're watching me sign a deal with the man you replaced me with, and he doesn't even know who I am to you. That's the difference between us. I know how to lose quietly. You don't know how to regret quietly. She looked down, blinking fast. I didn't feel anything. Not triumph, not pity, just clarity. Later that night, I was walking toward the valet when I saw her again. This time standing alone near the wine bar, arms wrapped around herself, face turned away. She wasn't glowing anymore. She looked like someone trying to hold together the version of herself she thought Ernest could secure. I would have kept walking, but she called out again. Jordan, please. I paused. Her voice was steadier now. Can I ask you one thing? I turned slightly. What? Did you ever look back? After I left? No. She blinked, stunned by the bluntness. Not even once? Not once, I said calmly. Because looking back only matters when there's something to return to. She took a shaky breath. Do you love her? It took me a moment to understand who she meant. Then I realized, Susan. She must have seen us together earlier, talking near the fountain. Susan had nothing to do with this. But Carmen was desperate to believe that I hadn't changed without some other woman being responsible for it. I owe everything I've built to myself, I told her. No one saved me. No one pulled me out. I climbed out because I had to. She nodded slowly. And what about forgiveness? For who? For me. I tilted my head. Forgiveness isn't hard. But that doesn't mean you get access again. That chapter's closed. We both signed the ending. A long silence passed between us. Then she said, "You know, Ernest only proposed after he read about your company valuation." I didn't react. I'd already guessed that. But he doesn't know that we were married. He doesn't know I used to laugh at your startup plans. I looked her in the eye. Then he's not the fool. You are. That shut her down completely. I took my keys from the valet, stepped into the car, and didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that closure wasn't about answers. It was about walking away, fully knowing the truth. She wasn't my loss. I was hers. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of Carmen. Not because of the party or the way her eyes trembled when I told her I'd never looked back. It was the silence afterward. The kind of silence that creeps in after you say things you waited years to say. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It just feels final. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why it didn't feel like victory. Maybe because revenge, even the quiet kind, never really heals anything. It just confirms what you already knew, that they were never worth the parts of you they took. By morning, I'd already checked my calendar twice before I realized I had nothing scheduled until noon. I hated empty hours. They left room for thinking. For remembering, I got in the car and drove aimlessly for a while. Eventually, I stopped outside a small cafe near the river, one I hadn't been to in years. Back when I still had Carmen, we used to pass it on our walks. She always said it looked too plain. I always liked it. As I stepped inside, a familiar voice called from the back. "Didn't expect to see you before lunch. Susan." She was seated by the window, laptop open, coffee half drunk, and an expression that didn't shift when she saw me. That was the thing about her. She never looked surprised by anything. Not success, not failure, not even me, showing up without notice. I sat across from her without asking. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I should be." "But you're not." I didn't respond. She shut her laptop gently and folded her hands. "I saw Carmen follow you last night." "I know." She looked like she was about to unravel. "She already has," I said. Susan nodded slowly. "And you? Did that help?" "No." The word fell heavier than I expected. "Why not?" I stared out the window for a few seconds. Because I didn't feel anything. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Nothing. She was breaking apart and I felt empty. "That's not failure," Susan said. "That's closure. It doesn't feel like closure. Because you haven't let go." I looked at her for a long moment. "I did let go." "No," she said softly. "You just stopped chasing. That's not the same." I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe she was right. Maybe letting go meant more than silence and distance. Maybe it meant releasing the resentment too. Susan stirred her coffee, then added, "I remember when you first started that software project. You'd come to the shared office late at night, trying to figure out funding, pitching to investors who didn't even read your deck." I smiled faintly. "You remember that?" "I remember everything about people who keep going even when no one's watching." That line stayed with me longer than it should have. It made me realize something Carmen never gave me. Validation, without performance. Carmen only admired results. Susan respected the process. "Do you regret not telling Carmen to stay?" she asked after a while. No, I said, because if she had stayed, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be me. Susan nodded like she already knew. And that's when it really hit me. I hadn't just lost Carmen. I'd spent years rebuilding a life she never believed in, only to realize too late that I didn't need her belief. I needed mine. I looked at Susan again. She was dressed simply, no theatrics, no perfection, just presence. She didn't compete with silence. She didn't demand answers. She just sat there, being real. And that was more rare than any apology. I think I was afraid, I said finally, that all this success would feel hollow if no one from my past saw it. Susan raised her eyebrow. You wanted her to regret it. Maybe. And now? I shrugged. Now, I just want peace. She leaned back in her chair and smiled. Then stop waiting for people to notice. The right ones already have. 2 days later, Carmen showed up at my office. She didn't call. She didn't make an appointment. She just walked straight past reception and told my assistant she was my wife. Technically, she wasn't lying. Legally, our divorce hadn't gone through until 3 days after she posted her engagement to Ernest. A detail I never bothered correcting. Publicly. I was too busy building something that couldn't be taken away with a headline. When I walked out of the meeting room and saw her sitting calmly on the couch, flipping through a copy of Forbes with my face on it, I knew this wouldn't be a civil visit. Jordan, she said like my name was a memory. You're not on my calendar. She stood. I didn't think I needed to be. You do now. There was a pause, just long enough for her to realize I wasn't smiling. I want to talk. You're doing that already. She stepped closer, her voice lowering. Ernest and we're not together anymore. I said nothing. She continued. He found out about us, about our past. About your past, I corrected. I've moved on. Her jaw tightened. He said I wasn't transparent, that if I could hide something like that from him, I'd hide anything. That's fair. She blinked, caught off guard. So that's it? No sympathy? You didn't come here for sympathy. She hesitated. I came to ask for a second chance. The words just hung there, like a thread waiting to be pulled. I studied her carefully. Same polished exterior, same practiced confidence. But there was something desperate behind her eyes this time. You came back because your safety net snapped, I said. Not because you missed me. And definitely not because you loved me. I do now, she said too fast. You love that I became what you didn't wait for. She reached out, almost touched my arm. I stepped back. Don't do that, I said calmly. Why not? Because you don't get to circle back. That's not how real life works. Her face twisted. You were nothing when I left you. I was building. You just didn't stay long enough to see the foundation set. And her? She asked. Susan? Is she part of your foundation now? She didn't arrive to collect the reward. She showed up when there was nothing to gain. That's the difference. For a moment, Carmen's mask dropped completely. She looked wrecked, but I didn't feel powerful. I just felt done. You know what hurts, she whispered. Not that I lost you, but that I didn't even know what I had until I saw someone else value it. I nodded. That's how most people learn. Too late. Carmen didn't leave right away. She stood there in my office, staring at the space between us like she couldn't cross it, like the few feet of polished floor were a canyon she'd built with her own hands. I wasn't trying to manipulate you, she said finally. You're not, I replied, because I'm not giving you a chance to. Her throat tightened. Jordan, I've been thinking about everything. I realize now what I did. I know what I threw away. That doesn't mean it's still yours? She took a breath like she was about to make a final plea. I'm not that person anymore. Neither am I said flatly. But only one of us changed before it was too late. A long pause. She blinked, tried to hold eye contact, and failed. You didn't even flinch when I told you the engagement ended, she said bitterly. No, I said, because that was inevitable. You weren't in love. You were in a race to escape your own fears. And now that the man you thought would fix that walked away, you're trying to rewrite history. Her lips parted slightly. So that's it? Carmen, I said, taking a step forward. The night you gave me the divorce papers, I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I didn't beg. Do you want to know why? She nodded slowly, silently. Because somewhere inside, I knew I was being set free. She looked away. I loved you. Not the version in designer dresses or social posts. I loved you when we had nothing but a dream and a small apartment with leaky pipes. I would have gone to war for you, but you didn't need a soldier. You needed a shortcut. Tears welled in her eyes. You said I was too slow, that I'd never catch up to what you wanted. I gave a humorless laugh. Turns out I wasn't behind. You were just impatient. She tried to speak but couldn't. Her voice caught somewhere, between guilt and disbelief. I didn't stop. You know what real love looks like? It doesn't leave when the balance sheet is empty. It doesn't measure value by how quickly you can climb a ladder someone else built. Real love stays. Real love waits. She looked at me with a quiet kind of desperation. Then did I never really love you? You loved what I could become. You just didn't want to wait around to see if I would. You wanted to cash out early. And now the market's closed. She winced. That's cold. No, I said. That's clarity. Her tears finally spilled, but she wiped them quickly, still trying to maintain some last fragment of dignity. I sat down and gestured for her to do the same. To my surprise, she did. I'm not going to destroy you, Carmen, I said gently. I'm not here to expose your mistakes or shame you or parade my success. That's not who I am. She nodded, eyes glossy. But I will not let you re-enter a life you walked away from. Not as a friend, not as a maybe, not even as a memory I entertain. A sharp exhale escaped her. You don't hate me, she said, almost like she was trying to find comfort in the idea. No, I don't hate you. Then why won't you give me another chance? Because I love myself now. That silenced her completely. You taught me something valuable, Carmen. You taught me that love isn't about proving you're enough. It's about knowing when to stop trying. And when I stopped trying for you, I found myself. I stood. That's all I needed. That's all I ever needed. She stood too, hands trembling slightly. I never thought you could be this strong. I always was, I said. You just never stayed long enough to see it. We walked to the door together, and for a second she hesitated like she wanted to say something else. Maybe to beg, maybe to pretend. But she didn't. She just looked at me and said quietly, Goodbye, Jordan. Goodbye, Carmen. She left. This time without slamming doors or leaving bruises shaped like her silence. Just gone. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel hollow after she left. A few hours later, I found myself at the Riverside Cafe again. I didn't call ahead, I just went. Susan was there, as always, in her quiet corner, typing away like the world had no idea how valuable she was. She looked up as I walked in. No surprise, just recognition. I sat across from her again. You look lighter, she said. I am, she nodded. That happened before or after Carmen showed up at your office? My brows lifted. You knew? She was at the lobby desk for over an hour. The building talks. I exhaled. She asked for a second chance. Susan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. And? I closed the door. She smiled softly. Good. I told her I don't hate her. You shouldn't. She cried. They always do, when they realize late love costs more than early faith. I looked at her and asked the question I hadn't dared to voice. Do you think I'm free now? Susan set her laptop aside. You've always been free. You just finally stopped holding the door open for someone who already walked out. That night, I didn't think about Carmen at all. Because when someone finally sees your worth without needing proof, the ones who left don't matter. 3 weeks passed. I didn't hear from Carmen again. No emails, no texts, no uninvited visits. It was like she finally understood that some doors, once closed, don't reopen. But the city talks, quietly, ruthlessly, especially when a name like hers starts to fade. Word got around that Ernest had cut all financial ties. The engagement never made it past the headline. His family quietly removed her name from every press release and scrubbed every planned gala mention clean. She was back to square one. No fiancé, no access, no spotlight, just Carmen. Alone. Some. People pitied her, others mocked her. I did neither, because revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes the silence that follows your absence is louder than anything you could have said. She once told me, "You'll never catch up to me." Now, I was being invited to conferences she couldn't buy tickets to. That was enough. Meanwhile, things between Susan and me didn't explode into romance. There was no forced confession, no cliché kiss in the rain. What we had was something rarer. Respect, consistency, quiet presence. She never tried to fill Carmen's space. She simply made it clear she'd never leave gaps of her own. She didn't ask for attention. She earned it. One Thursday morning, I walked into the office and found a sealed envelope on my desk with Susan's handwriting. It wasn't dramatic. No bold statements. Just a single line. Lunch at 2. I'm taking you somewhere different. At exactly 2, she walked into my office, no hesitation in her step. She handed me a helmet. We're not driving? Nope. She led me out to the parking garage where a matte black motorcycle was waiting. I raised an eyebrow. You ride? Every Thursday, it clears my head. Is that an offer? It's a warning, she smiled. Hold on tight. The ride was fast, clean, and free. For the first time in years, I laughed without rehearsing it. She took me to a quiet hill on the edge of the city where the skyline looked like someone painted it by hand. We sat on the hood of her car, eating takeout from a bag, no wine glasses, no tablecloths, just peace. Susan looked over at me. You're not chasing anymore. No, I said. I'm not. Does it feel like you thought it would? No, I admitted. It feels better. She nodded. That's how you know it's real. I looked at her and realized something that hit deeper than all the money, partnerships, or closed loops. Carmen taught me how to break. But Susan? She showed me what it looked like not to shatter. I got a call later that night, one I didn't expect. It was from the board of Langford Holdings. Not Ernest, his father. Mr. Hayes, the older voice said with a certain weight. We'd like to move forward with a joint expansion initiative. Your software was the best performance piece in our last quarter. I'm glad to hear that. Also, Carmen Liu will no longer be affiliated with any of our social partnerships. I thought you'd want to know. I leaned back in my chair, watching the skyline outside my office. I already knew. Did you have anything to do with it? No, I said, pausing slightly. But I didn't stop it either. He laughed. That's what power looks like, son. No anger, no sarcasm, just respect. The same man who once introduced Carmen as his future daughter-in-law was now calling me with the tone of someone who knew I'd won. After I hung up, I walked downstairs to the lounge where Susan was reviewing reports with the finance team. She didn't flinch when she saw me. You're late, she said, tapping the clock on her tablet. I was wrapping something up. Something good? Something done. She didn't push for details. She never did. That's how she earned them. I sat beside her and handed her a small velvet box. Not a ring, just something real. Inside was a solid silver bracelet. Simple, unbranded, timeless. She opened it. Didn't speak right away. You told me once, I said, that loyalty isn't loud. I wanted you to have something that matched that. Her fingers brushed the metal. I wasn't expecting this. That's the point. She didn't say thank you. She just reached over and held my hand beneath the table, while still talking about quarterly projections like nothing had changed. And maybe that's what real change looks like. Not declarations, not apologies, just the absence of pain and the quiet arrival of peace. Weeks later, at an industry summit, Carmen showed up again, this time not as a guest but as a background attendee. Her badge didn't carry her last name anymore. She'd taken her mother's maiden name. She avoided me, and I let her, not because I was indifferent, but because I no longer saw her as someone worth the confrontation. As I stood on stage presenting alongside Langford executives and global venture leads, I caught her watching, not with envy, not even regret, just realization. She had bet against me and lost, not loudly, not immediately, but completely, and that was the ending she gave herself. I left the summit early. I had a flight to catch with Susan, our first overseas project together. As we boarded the jet, she looked over her shoulder and said, "You ever think you'll stop winning?" I smiled, pulled her close, and whispered, "Not if you're standing next to me."